got some latest additions. First, I want to talk about the freshman they're bringing in. I think it's Abdu Jr. I can't remember how you pronounce it.
Yarma.
Yeah, Yarma. I watched his highlights, Alex. 6'7", 185 pounds, 175 pounds. Mentioned it on a couple of shows I was on today. This past year at OTE, averaged 13 points a game on 11 shot attempts. Can shoot the ball. Looks to have decent handle, probably a project, but he can also jump out the gym. And him, Eli, and Hayden have been on the same team for a while now. So your takeaway on adding him, I saw some discourse about it.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, like, when you look at him, he kind of fits what Lamont Paris is looking for at that position, like a guy that can kind of stretch the floor and pretty good shooter, as you mentioned. So I think, a guy that, maybe next year you're not seeing a whole lot of, a guy that can take that development, red shirt potentially, and we'll see what he can do in the preseason and to get ready for the season. But, it was an interesting pickup that I thought it was, kind of just fell right into their hands with, not going to High Point for him, but it could end up being in the long run a nice piece that they were able to get, especially because, as you mentioned, the chemistry he already has with some of the other guys on the team.
And look, I said it today on a couple of shows. I'm going to say it again because this is our show, and I always want our voices to be on our show as well. And look, if he had gone to High Point and been a 10-point per game guy, 12-point per game guy as a freshman, who knows? He was a 13-point per game guy at OTE. Now, is OTE and High Point similar competition? I'd say High Point's a little tougher, night in, night out, better coaches, better scouting reports, all of that. But if he was a double-digit scorer at High Point, he would be a much more expensive player next year if South Carolina wanted to recruit him. So it's a numbers game now. It really is. And if you can take a kid and I don't want to say hide him on the end of your bench, but yeah, hide him on the end of your bench where nobody's going to come in and say, hey, here's $200,000. Here's $250,000. Here's $3. That's a good thing because you can kind of hold that market in place. And look, that is something I never thought I would say about college basketball or college football, but it is a thing now. And this is run like a business. And if I have somebody that I can hide in the background and coach up and teach, I'm going to pay them not that much money to do it for a greater reward later. You do it. But I'm not saying all of that's 100% what happened with Abu. I'm just saying that's a more general conversation. Then the other news was Nordan Kapik. I think that's how you pronounce it, or Kapik, or Kapik.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, we'll know by the time we got to talk about him again. But I looked at him, Alex, and 15-8 against Michigan in the NCAA tournament, the highest level of competition. 10-5 guy for UC Riverside, I guess it was, or San Diego, I can't remember. But top 500 in defensive rebounding percentage, according to KenPom. Top 500 in free throw rate, according to KenPom. Offensive efficiency rating over 100. Really good player. And I've seen this different places, Alex, and I don't want to get too nerdy into the numbers because I can do that sometimes. Like, I can be a nerd. But Alex, how many college basketball players were scholarship players in the SEC last year? Just give or take.
I don't even. What's the number?
Okay, so there were 224 scholarship players in the SEC last year. Okay, so when I say top 500, people sit there and say top 500. Like, only 60 players get drafted in the NBA. Well, there's 244 players in the SEC.
Yeah.
And this guy was top 500 in the country. And that's pretty daggum good. That's like the highest percentile. So I'm looking at this, and look, Michi, top 355. He was 355th in assist rate in the country both years at South Carolina. Higher one year, but at least 355th best in the country. Always over 20% assist rate. And not to get too nerdy, but assist rate just means how many baskets did your team make while you were on the court that you assisted for? And over 20% is an elite point guard. So we went there and talked about, or at least an elite facilitator. We went back and we said, whoa, Michi at point guard, like, this might not work. What are the coaches thinking? And I keep digging into the numbers and digging into the metrics and saying, well, who's to say if Talon didn't come to South Carolina, he wouldn't have been a 30%. I mean, even with Talon, he was over 20%. So I see these puzzle pieces fitting together is, I guess, where I'm going with it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to mention. One with Nordan, but really with the whole transfer class as a whole, as it stands right now, you can see they kind of went back to finding guys that fit what they want to do. And I think they kind of tried to do that last year, but maybe tried to get more athletic. Bringing in a Nick Pringle who's add some more athleticism to the paint. But when you looked at what they brought in 2 years ago for the NCAA tournament team, BJ Mack really fit what Lamont Paris want to do. And with BJ Mack, I think you can see a little bit of Nordan or a little bit of BJ Mack and Nordan or Kapik because I think you see just from the size. I think he's 6'8", 245 pounds, and guy that can really kind of do some pick and pop stuff. Has a little bit of a 3-point ability, like shot 30.7%, but I think he's probably a little bit better shooter overall than that. But so I think with him and then having a 5.2 rebounds per game, and as you mentioned, in the biggest moments against the best teams, played really well against Michigan, and so I think he's another one that really fits what Lamont Paris and the staff want in that system. And, kind of going to your Michi Johnson point as well, like obviously he played a lot of point his first year at South Carolina, but when you look at it, there wasn't too much weapon-wise around him because when you had G.G. Jackson who was still trying to figure things out. And, I kind of wonder as well. He did play a little bit of point last year for South Carolina, or 2 years on the NCAA tournament team for South Carolina. Obviously, Talon was the main point guard, but I think I'm still interested to see how that fully turns out if it does go the way that Michi Johnson is the primary point guard and does a lot of the point guard ability. But I think he has the ability to do a good enough job there because when you watch him play, he's got that quick first step that he can drive past his man and have defenders flow to him. You can kick out to a Nordan who, as we talked about, has a pretty decent 3-point shot, and some of these other guys, Kobe Knox or whoever it's going to be. And so I think you're just starting to see the Lamont Paris, and obviously they got one more spot left, but you're really starting to see them kind of get back to what they were doing. It was when he got to South Carolina, and then with that NCAA tournament team of kind of just finding guys who just have maybe a high IQ basketball type of players, and not to say the guys that this past year weren't, but just kind of getting back to what they're looking for and guys that fit their system.
And look, the other thing too is Cam Scott coming back. I don't want to gloss over that. Cam Scott entered the transfer portal, came back. Nothing wrong with that in my eyes. Like if you're a Columbia kid and you look at other options and you still think that Columbia is the best place for you despite last season, and Cam showed flashes, I think that, and I said it when Cam went to the portal, I'd hoped the Gamecocks could have been able to keep him, and it turns out they were able to, and I'm excited for that opportunity as well for Cam. And I think this team, and I said it today, if this team can shoot 36% as a team from the 3-point line and average less than 12 turnovers per game, they're going to be in the NCAA tournament. Like that, those are the two metrics that I'm looking at right now. I don't even care about rebounding. I really don't, because if you don't turn the ball over and you can hit threes, that is the great equalizer in basketball. If you can turn other teams over, you're going to get the bunnies. You're going to get the fast break points. So,
and obviously we'll talk more about once we get close to the season, about just what the team's going to look like overall. But I think the biggest thing is just continue once preseason practice starts, like getting into Lamont Paris's defensive system, and because we know what these guys can do for the most part from a shooting standpoint or a back to the basket type standpoint. But now I think the big step for those guys is getting together as one from a defensive standpoint, because they kind of overall struggled with that this past season. Defensively was a little bit of struggle overall, and I think that's a huge key for this team next year, and to see kind of what they can do defensively and get back to 2 years ago.
And I think they can. They have a lot of length there. They have a lot. I'm not going to say athleticism. I'm not going to say a lot of athleticism, but they have a lot of length. I mean, there's only 3 guys on the team under 6'5" or under. And look, next year they're going to be replacing at least 5 up to 6 players from this roster again. So just buckle in and get used to it. You got to hope that these freshmen come along. But one thing that I don't know if it's been talked about enough, and I'm going to bring it up now, and I'm not going to elaborate on it. I mean, you can say what you want on it, Alex, but having a guy like Eli Ellis on your team in a transfer portal and NIL era, someone that everybody knows, everybody respects, he's earned his stripes. it might not pay off coming in as a true freshman, but if he comes in and buys in and does everything that he said he wants to do, that might have a payoff next year. And like, just don't you dare count out Lamont Paris. I'm just telling you right now, the guy did the best coaching job I've seen in a long time this past season, and even better than he did 2 years ago. So excited for this team. Let's see if they can make the NCAA tournament. But